this video, I'm going to be discussing how to clean up some of the test code that we've been working with. So if you've been watching any of the previous videos, I've been working off of the Tour of Heroes project from the Angular website. I haven't made any modifications from the last video, which was creating code coverage for the project. So it's just an increment off of that video. All right, let's just jump right in here. First of all, we're going to make a new branch. Call this test code cleanup. And got my notes as usual. So we're going to jump into our app.ts. That's going to be found in E2E test specs directory. So app.ts, let's go in there. And let's get back to the top. The first thing we're really going to tackle is I want to get rid of these constants that are just kind of floating at the top of this file. We're going to take a few videos, a few different tutorials to clean up all of this code, but the first step is just let's see if we can clean this up. We'll knock that out in this video. All right, so the first two, expect H1 and expected title, that's pretty simple. If you click on these, it will highlight all of their uses. So you can kind of see here, we'll click out of it. What you're going to end up seeing is sort of a grayish color in this column off to the side where you can actually scroll through the code. You'll see that when I click it, you've got a highlight here and a highlight at the top as well, which is because it's used here. So if I scroll down to the section where it's showing the highlight, you can see that the expected H1 code is in this part of the initial page test. And it's not really used anywhere else. So you can actually look through here and you see that it's nowhere else is it being highlighted. So that's great. It's really localized, which means I'm going to inline some of this code. All right, so actually, no, this will be kind of fascinating. One thing I did change VSCode. I've installed Abracadabra, which I highly recommend. I'll put a link in the video to that. Abracadabra is a bunch of additional refactoring automation. Automated refactoring, that's what it says in here, for VSCode in JavaScript and TypeScript, which is exactly what we're working in. And I think it said something like there's like 34 or 35 refactorings that this thing provides, which is awesome. So let's give it a try. We're going to click on that, and we use the light bulb function, and we should see some of those refactorings come up. And it's the ones that have this nice little star symbol emoji going on. So let's go inline variable, and let's see what that does. Cool. So you can see expected title now changed to Tour of Heroes, and my guess would be and so we can scroll, the blue color now is a diff. So we can see that it actually inlined this as well. Has H1 Tour of Heroes, Tour of Heroes. So that's pretty interesting, but I don't really want to repeat that code. So let's go ahead and change this to the const expected H1, kind of like what it was before. So we're really just moving the code down closer to where it's being used. So let's just undo this. And we'll do this manually instead. Okay, so back to here. Sorry for the scrolling. We're going to copy this, and we'll go down to where it's being used. I'm just going to drop it in right there. This code stays the same since it is sharing the same values. We'll leave that alone, and we'll go up here and we'll just remove this. We don't need it anymore, which isn't completely true. We need to change this, copy this down. So now we can remove, now we can see it's no longer being referenced, so we can remove it. And we'll do the same thing here. Copy this down to where it's being used. You can see it is being used in also one location, so that's great. So the expected title, that covers that. And then as you can see, it is no longer being used because it's a lighter color, so we'll remove it. And I'm using Control D. I think that's because I've got an Eclipse keymap going, so I'm using old school Eclipse keys because that's what I learned to program in many, many, many years ago. Okay. All right, so that's pretty simple. And as I like to do, we're going to run our code, make sure we didn't break anything. So npm run e to e. Very minor change. I don't expect anything to fail because of that. And I suppose we could have been a bit sophisticated and actually just ran the initial page tests. Kind of discussed that in a previous video. One of my lunchtime tip videos talks about how you can execute specific tests. But perfect. We've got 22 passing tests, so nothing failed with that change. So that's good. Let's go ahead and commit that code. We'll do a work in progress cleaning up test code. And we'll say that moved the expected h1 and title test data closer to the actual test code. Commit that, and we'll publish that branch. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to tackle getting rid of this target hero constant, and we're going to do that by moving some of this code inside of the hero class. That way we're going to actually start grouping up the test data into one location, and then in a future video I'm going to move the hero class out into its own file. Alright, so first let's actually move this block of code underneath the hero class. That way we're going to reference the data that's inside of this hero class further down. So we want to make sure that the hero class is defined first, and then we can reference it. So first up, let's add the target hero data. So we'll do a static read-only. We'll call it test target, and that is of hero type, and it's going to be an exact copy of this. And I'm calling it test target instead of target hero because having hero in the name would be a bit redundant since it is in the hero class. And it still has sort of the same meaning. What we're talking about here is that there's a hero that we want to target for our testing. All right, so that we don't break the code and we do things in incremental changes, we will now reference that constant or that static read-only variable. So hero test target. And you can see we don't have any compilation errors, so that's a good sign. And then the last thing we'll do here is we'll actually use Abracadabra, and we will inline this because we don't want this variable anymore. So let's inline that. You can see it goes away. We see that new hero name is now using the class constant, static read-only variable, however you want to look at it. I like to think of it as a constant. And we've got a bunch of diffs that showed up because that code is kind of used all over the place. So like hero.testTarget, getting the name here. I think there's another place that uses the test target's ID, so that's great. So all this stuff got replaced because of that refactor. So that looks good. Let's go ahead and I'll auto format the code just in case we added some, well, actually it looks like we added a new line here, so let's remove that, clean that up a little bit. And once again, let's do a run through the code. Oh, before we do that, actually no, I was going to say we can go ahead and specify or filter down to a few of the tests, but that's not a good idea because we've made quite a few changes across all of the test cases because of that refactor. So we're just going to go ahead and run the whole suite. It's not too big, so it's not going to take too long. It's always a good idea when doing these types of refactors to rerun your test code, make sure that it's still behaving the way that it's intended to behave. Cool. So that refactor was nice and clean. We still have 22 passing tests. Pretty good shape there. Okay, so let's do another commit. Commit don't quit. All right. Let's see here. Yep. Just making sure that this stuff makes sense. We moved this block of code down and we moved the test target up. We've got a bunch of diffs because of the inlining, so that's great. This all looks normal. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to reuse the last message. So if you hit the up arrow, you're going to get the last message to show up. And we're just going to modify this because our summary is good. We're still cleaning up the test code. And we did a couple of things here. So we moved the test data constant block down actually we'll say move test data constant block after the hero class and moved the target hero test data into the hero class. Okay. Sync those changes. All right, I think we're good there. So let's get back to this. We're actually going to skip the target hero dashboard index constant until the end of the video. This requires a bit of redesign work, so we'll save that to the end. So let's move on to the new hero name and the name suffix. The new hero name is going to be very similar to the test target test data that we moved into the hero class. How the new hero name is used is it's used in test cases that deal with renaming an existing hero, in particular renaming the test target. So what we're going to do is we're going to simplify some of this code. It's going to require a small redesign, but I'll walk you through it. It's not too difficult. So another static read only. We're going to call this test rename because that's sort of the intended functionality, is to rename an existing hero. Again, it's the same hero type. And we're going to copy this and simplify what this block of code is doing. All it's doing is it's taking the test target name, which is Magneta, and appending the name suffix, which is an X. So we'll just do that. So I have Magneta X. And because it is a rename, it's going to keep the same ID. So we'll leave these both as 15. Next up, let's go ahead and change this code to reference our new constant. So that's going to be hero test rename, and it's the name property because this variable, all it's really holding is the name, not the whole object. And as you can see, we still don't have any compilation errors, so that's a really good sign that that refactor is probably going to work. All right, so next up is name suffix. Actually, before we go to name suffix, let's go and see if we can inline this piece of code now. So really we want anything that references new hero name to simply just refer to the constant, the class constant. So let's go ahead and use Abracadabra, and we'll go inline variable. And great, we've got some diffs across our test code and no compilation errors, so that's another really good sign. All right, so back to the name suffix. If I click on that, you can see that, well, maybe it's a little bit difficult to see, but it's only used in one place. We can also do a control or command click, and that's going to jump us to where it's being used. If it was used in more than one place, a dialog would have appeared showing us all the different uses. So in this case, like I said, it was only used once, so it dropped us right down to here. What we're going to want to do is do a little bit of redesign work in here. So the update hero name in detail view, that function is actually called in our test code. And the point of it is it's to update or rename the existing hero, appending on the name suffix. Well, the name suffix is now kind of baked into the test underscore rename test data, so we don't really want to break that out. I want to keep that data simple. So instead what we'll do is instead of add to hero name, so that's what this is calling, is it's calling this function, which appends the suffix that's passed in to the existing value, in this case the hero's name. We're going to change this to just a straight rename instead of an appending value. So let's rename this. I'm doing a Shift Alt, but I believe on a Mac it's a Shift Option. And we'll go rename hero. If that shortcut key is not correct for a Mac, feel free to comment, let me know what it is. And we'll change this as well to name. And instead of add value, which is, like I said, going to append a value onto this input box, which in this case is the hero's name, we're going to do a set value, which is going to clear the input field and set the name that's passed through. All right, so no compilation errors with any of those changes, and a couple more changes in here. I want to make the test data, especially the expected results, a bit more consistent. The old code is referring to the test target, which makes sense because the ID doesn't change because we're doing a rename, but for consistency, this really should be test rename and get the ID of that object. That way, we do the rename and then we set our expectations to be around the test rename test data, so the ID and name. All right, that should fix all of that. So let's scroll back up. And that should have removed the name suffix. Oh, my mistake. We didn't change this piece. So this now, we're renaming the hero, we're not using the suffix anymore, so we need to do hero test rename name. So that'll pull in the full name. Okay, now if we go back up, we should see that name suffix is no longer used. Perfect. Okay, so let's go ahead and run the tests and make sure we didn't break anything. Perfect. 22 passing tests, still looking good. All right, let's go ahead and commit this code. Again, let's do a quick review of the diff, make sure we didn't change something inadvertently. So we have our Magneta X, and you know what, let's we'll do the comment at the same time. So up arrow one more time gets us the last message. Let's change these. So we moved new hero name test data. We'll actually say we moved the new hero name and name suffix test data into the hero class. And you can see all the refactoring that happened because of that. And then we redesigned this function, the add to hero name function to rename hero. All right, let's commit that. Sync those changes to the branch. Last but not least is the target hero dashboard index constant. So let's talk about this a little bit. So how this is working is the dashboard displays the top heroes, and in particular the hero we've been working with, the Magneta hero. It has an index of 2, so it's the third displayed item on the dashboard. Remember, dashboard items are 0 based, so this will be the third item. And this is hard-coded, so as you can imagine, if this test data changes at all, this code's going to break. And we don't want that. We don't want our code to be fragile, so let's figure out how to make this a bit more resilient. And the way we're going to do that is by creating a function that's going to look up the hero by its name. So let's scroll down to some of our other helper functions. And in a future video, we'll work on how to clean up and reorganize these helpers, probably put them into another file or maybe utility class of some sort, but we'll do that later. Okay, so where this is used is so here's the target hero dashboard index, and it's used by this dashboard select target hero. So this is probably a good area to add a new function. All right, so take a look at some of my notes just to remind myself of what I'm doing here. Get dashboard hero by name. Take a look. We can close this too. Let's clean this up a little bit, our workspace. Okay, so let's do an async function, get dashboard hero by name. That's going to take a string. And what's going to happen here is we're going to loop through. So you can see here that what it's doing is it's using the top heroes and supplying that index. So instead of supplying a hard-coded value, we're actually going to loop through these top heroes and pull out the one by its name. Now, in order to do that, we need to be careful when we work with arrays of elements. And as you can see, this thing right here, if it shows me, it should be able to show me what this is. Here we go, top heroes. It's using $, so this is an array of elements, and that array of elements is not necessarily deterministic, and there's no way to know out of the box if this array is the correct size. So we need to actually wait for this thing to populate. And how we do that is by using wait until, which is built into WebDriver IO. So what we'll do is we'll do something like await browser wait until, and this needs to be async because we're going to do some asynchronous stuff inside of here. And we'll go ahead and steal some of this code. So const top heroes equals that. And for const top hero of top heroes. So this is where we're going to loop through each of these and try to find something. So if, and we need to wait on this, top hero get text is equal to name, then we we found what we're looking for, so we'll return true. So how this works is wait until you need to either return true or false. If you return false, it's going to loop through this code again, which is exactly what we want. So we don't know exactly when Top Heroes is going to be fully populated, so we need to keep spinning on this until it finds the top hero with the name we're interested in, so the name we supply. This thing, wait until, has a baked-in timeout, and that's configured by WebDriver IO. So it will keep doing this, and it'll time out by whatever the default timeout is, which I believe is 10 seconds. So if it never finds, maybe you supply the wrong hero name, or maybe there's a bug in the application code that's not displaying the names properly or something of that nature, well, this thing will loop and keep getting false, and then eventually it'll time out after 10 seconds and it'll throw an error, which is exactly what you would want. But in our case, this is going to work. This code's pretty stable, or the application code's pretty stable, so it is going to find the hero we're looking for. So it'll return true. But we do need to return false. Like I said, if it gets through this for loop and finds nothing, we need to return false so that it can try again. So you can kind of consider that wait until is like a loop, an outer loop for this inner loop. And we do want to know, we want to actually get the hero. So let's create a variable up top, and we'll call this a hero. And that's good enough. So this thing is going to be set to the top hero once we find it. And this actual function, so outside of this wait until, will return the hero once it's found. And like I said, it's safe to just return the hero. This thing will never be null, because if we get to return false so many times that wait until times out, meaning that we never found the hero, this will throw an exception anyway. It'll throw an error. So we don't really need to worry about checking if hero is legitimate or not. This will take care of it. And we can go ahead and let VSCode infer the type, which is perfect. It is a WebDriver IO element. Let's format the code. That looks good. And I highly recommend, so wait until can take another parameter, and it's a bunch of options you can supply to wait until. You can actually change the timeout, but in particular what we want to do is set a timeout message, and I highly recommend that we do this for all of our wait untils so that we get a nice, easy to understand error message when this does fail. So we'll say something like hero, the name of the hero was not found on the dashboard. All right, and just to be clear, this function is like very specific to finding something in the dashboard, and that's because of this variable references the dashboard. So if you look at this, it says app root app dashboard. So this is very specific to that. Okay, so that looks good. So we should be able to go back up. And we're not going to change anything here. We need to find its uses. So this is going to show us multiple uses. So as you can see, a dialog comes up, and we can kind of jump around to each of the uses. So we'll change this to get, it's actually going to be a wait, get hero dashboard hero by name. And that's going to be hero test target name. Perfect. Let's take a look at where else it's used. So this one's going to be a little bit trickier because this is actually renaming the hero. So what we want to do here is we need to find the renamed hero. So we can do a dashboard hero, dashboard hero by name, and this one's going to be hero test rename. And we'll actually simplify this code in a second. We can collapse this in just a minute here. And let's go to the last place this is used, which is in the actual selection of the target hero. So we can change this too. So we'll wait, get dashboard, hero by name, and of course we have to supply the name. All right. So let's go ahead, let's format the code and let's run the tests again. Look, make sure that nothing is broken. Perfect, 22 passing tests, so that's really good. And like I said, we can simplify another piece of code. So let's go back to, let's see here. I believe it's this. So the rename. So all that's happening here is it's going in, it's changing, it's renaming the test target, saving it, and then checking to see that the renamed hero is showing on the dashboard. So we can actually collapse this down. So let's create a new, one more helper function for that. And it's going to be something like expect dashboard to have hero. And we'll supply the hero object. And this should be really easy. We can actually make use of this, so we don't need to rewrite this code. Do an await, and we'll take the hero name. So again, remember, this thing will fail if the hero isn't found, and it'll throw an error, which is exactly what we want this function to do. It's going to throw an error if the hero isn't found. Otherwise, it's going to find it and return it, but we don't need the return type. We just need to know that it exists or it doesn't exist. Okay, so if we go back up to the code, and we can replace all of this. This is the target one, so we don't want to change that. We want to change this one. Actually, we could probably change both. We'll look at that in a second. So this should really be expect dashboard to have hero, and it's going to be the renamed hero. And could we do this on this cancels and shows in dashboard? We could, in theory, actually change this as well. So let's copy that, and we just need to make sure we use the test target. So again, same thing. So we did a rename, but we canceled out, so we should be able to find the original test target. So test target. And that should mean that this is no longer used. Great. So we can delete that. And let's run our code. Perfect. 22 passing tests. So let me just show you what I mean, though, if this were to fail. So, for example, we did a rename, we saved it, and either we made a mistake in our code, our test code, or perhaps we've got a test where we don't save and it should remain the same. So we can we'll kind of fake that. So test target, this should fail. So let's run it again. Or not. Well, this is strange. Should have failed. Let's take a look here. It's because we didn't await on these. Very dangerous. The reason why these passed was because it actually didn't run that code. So here we go. And this is a good sign. We can see it kind of looping in the background, trying to find something that does not exist. Perfect. So we've got a failure. We've got one failing test out of 22. And we can see Hero Magneta was not found on the dashboard. And this is actually pretty good because it's showing that the test that we ran was dashboard test saves and shows Magneta X in the dashboard. So our test code is broken, which is exactly what we just did here. So, and just to give a little bit of a sneak preview of how you could debug something is you can actually click on these, command or control click. Usually the last one in the stack should bring you to the code that's in error. So what do you know? Line 107, this is exactly the area we changed. And this should be test rename. We should be back to passing. Just be careful, make sure you're using awaits. Otherwise this code's gonna run off, do its thing, but it's not gonna wait for it to finish, so it's gonna look like it passed. Perfect, back to normal. All right, let's go ahead and commit those changes. So this is no longer a work in progress. We have cleaned up the test code. Let's see, we'll say redesigned target hero dashboard index to use a helper function to find a hero element by name, by hero name. How about that? And simplified expectations for renaming the target hero. So that looks good. And actually this reminds me, looking at this diff, we added some new functions here. I know we've got some existing ones that don't have comments, no comment blocks, but we're going to add comment blocks to the code that we added. Maybe later in another video, or on your, actually, you know what, on your own, I would say, let's go through this code and add comment blocks to everything. That's just a good habit to get into. All right, so let's do that real quick. So this is going to be the hero's name, and let's not do a return type. That way VSCode can just infer the return type, so it'll give us that information automatically, which is nice, especially if we redesign this at all. And we'll say something like try to get a hero element from the dashboard. And I say try, again, because there's the possibility that this thing will time out and throw an error, so that's great. It's not always going to work. It's going to try to do it. And we'll mention that it throws error if the hero element cannot be found. How about that? And then let's add a comment block for this as well. The hero that is expected on the dashboard. And expect the dashboard view to have a specific hero. How about something like that? And you know, since we did redesign a piece of code, where is our rename block? Here we go. Let's do this. The new name. Oops, the new name of the hero. Rename an existing hero. Okay. I think we're good there. So let's go back. We've got our comment blocks in there. Looking really good. I guess we should have done that in the previous commit, but that's okay. It's not too far off from the truth. Okay, let's commit that and sync those changes. Alrighty. So, as you can see, that constant block is now completely gone. We've got some inline code. We've got things moved to the hero class. We've got some more resilient helper functions. If you've got any questions or comments, any thoughts about this refactor, let me know. Until next time, peace.